Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. Um, are you all awake? I've had enough coffee and no more hangovers? All right. My name is Claus Lavendt. I've been around for a couple of years. Not much. I'm from Denmark, so it's close by. So what's in it for you this session, securing your FileMaker solutions? This will be boring because everyone is very good at securing your solutions, right? Okay, great. So this will be boring, but I promise you, in the end, I'm gonna scare you. So some of you might want to not go out of the door, but run out of the door, right? So a little bit of a teaser. So we're gonna dig in, and the idea with going into the details and places that you have seen is to make you realize what does these things really mean. Even though you have seen them, but maybe you don't understand the full meaning of what it really does. So that is the idea. And there's a little touch on server security, because that's kind of involved on the on securing your solutions. But of course, there's so much else to cover, right? The security is many things. We are gonna focus mainly on the two parts of authentication and authorization, because that's really where the solution security is where we need to secure our solutions, right? So there are a lot of S's, right? So should we call it apps or? Okay, whatever. And we're gonna deep dive into the privileges sets of FileMaker, because that's actually where we have a lot of control. And finally, a big shout out to update your software, and I'm gonna tell you a reason why you should do so. Okay, so why should you care? So, and note, I said the source is the internet, because when you try to research what is the statistics on cyber attacks, it's like they are in all kinds of places, right? So I found some numbers here, and there are other numbers as well. But the fact is that a lot of small and medium businesses is hit by cyber attacks. And what we work with is mainly small and medium businesses. One of the things is that small and medium businesses do not have a big security budget. So in that sense, they could be easy targets, which is why it's even more important that we are great at securing the FileMaker solutions, because that's our domain, right? All the other stuff is where we, maybe we know stuff and we can apply some advice, but it's really not our domain to secure the network and so on, right? But within the FileMaker domain, let's do it as good as we can, right? And there was a number saying an average total cost of a cyber attack was 4.24 million. I've seen many different numbers. The fact is that if you get hit, not if you get hit, but when you get hit by a cyber attack, it is really costly. So we should actually pay some attention there. Another thing that is pretty important from the perspective of especially us that are doing solutions in the EU is that we are bound by the GDPR, who says that we have to apply security by default and apply privacy by default, right? So we are actually required by law to do a best effort to secure solutions, right? And 42% of all breaches, 21. I don't know if that's really accurate, but a lot of the breaches had breached personal data, which is not nice, right? And another interesting fact is that a lot of these data breaches is caused by insiders. So what does that mean, right? Both careless work, and it could also be someone who is on the inside that is doing stupid stuff or doing stuff on purpose, right? So, like I said, security is many things, right? This guy seems very scary, right? And we should be afraid of that, but that's kind of, that could be a North Korean hacker or Chinese hacker. And how do we secure against that? Actually, another threat that is much more likely is an angry employee that is stealing data, right? There's spies as well, and there's malware and other stuff that we need to take into account. But again, like I said, yeah, there's a lot of things that we need to consider, and this is just a number of words for things that comes to mind. But what we can really do something about is, like I said, in the FileMaker domain. So let's focus on two areas, the authentication part and the authorization part. So the authentication part is, so what is that? That is to verify who you are and make sure that you are who you say you are, right? That's when you go travel, you have a passport, and you can verify that. Within systems, we have been used to that it's something you know, it's a username and a password, right? So that's the first level of security. It's something you know, right? But if it's something you know, then someone else can obtain that information, maybe. So we can add another layer, like two-factor authentication, with something that you have, like a phone, or it could be a hardware key, right? And then actually we could add a third layer on top of that. So both something you know, something you have, and something you are, like your fingerprints or iris. And then I put in thoughts, right? That sounds too sci-fi, right? But actually there are scientists who has done research on wave brains and found that we have unique wave brains that you could use as authentication method. It's kind of strange, right? But maybe it will come, right? So if we are looking at FileMaker, we rely on username and password if we are using the FileMaker accounts built into FileMaker. So that's only one level of authentication. Is that really secure? Well, if you have good passwords, then maybe. But why not use external authentication? Because external authentication can give us two-factor. The two-factor authentication. So both something you know and something you have, right? So, like I said, FileMaker accounts only support the first layer, and to add better security is to use the external authentications. When you look at that, so maybe that's a little bit you look at many companies that are using the Office 360 or Microsoft Office or whatever name they have on it now, it comes with Azure, which is a directory service, and that offers two-factor authentication, which means that pretty much everyone you already work with have this thing. So it's not that complicated to add two-factor authentication. And the good thing about the Azure thing is that if you don't already have it, so it's included in a package, you can actually go and sign up for an account and use it for free. Well, that is, if you have a lot of logins, then you have to pay for it. But if you already have it, it's not a problem. So you just create accounts for users in your solutions, and then you don't care about the users, the name of the users and their logins. You only care about the group, so accounting, sales, whatever logical grouping makes sense for your solution, right? So another benefit for us is that managing the users can be moved away from us as developers to a user admin. So they will become responsible of adding and deleting, especially deleting users that are not there. So if someone got laid off, then shut down their access to the FileMaker system. And it's not on your shoulders to handle that. So that's another thing which is nice, right? Another thing, if we are storing passwords in FileMaker, that can be overwritten by cracker tools. And the only protection we have against that is to use the encryption at rest. So this is a red flag. If your files is not encrypted at rest, please apply that, because that's the only way we can protect files from being cracked, right? And just looking into passwords, this is a schema that's just over from 2020 to 23. As you can see, the green boxes is where it's supposed to be secure enough, right? So if we want something reliable, and just over 3 years, look how much green has disappeared from 2020 to 23. And I guess it's even worse this year. 18 characters and a combination of number, upper, lower, and special characters. So if you need a password, 8 digits is not enough. 12 is not enough. 18 is a better thing, and it has to be a combination. So how should we create passwords if we really need some? We use a custom function that we built that is just randomly setting different words together, and a combination of English and Danish and maybe German and some numbers as well, because then we have some special characters in that. The thing is that we can much easily remember pony, grandma, great pancakes, number 9. That's an easier sentence to remember than something that is just jibber jabber, a combination of a lot of characters. No one can remember that, so you just type it in a very insecure place. But go with the external authentication. Right. All right. And you're still awake? I said this was gonna be boring. Let's take a look into the authorization. So what is authorization? That is giving you access to resources. And it is dependent on the way that you access the resources and the way you can use the resources. That is what authorization is about. And resources, in our case, is mainly the data and the layouts in FileMaker, right? So, let's dig in. I just think it was a nice picture, so that's why I paused here. So looking into the 3 areas, the main areas is file options and solution living. And finally, what was the third one? Sorry. So in file options, we are really not getting much help when we are creating a new FileMaker file. First off, we get a file that has a full access account with the username admin and no password. Whoa, really secure. And then the file is set to open with minimum version of 12, right? At the end, I'm gonna tell you why this is extremely bad. So the first thing you wanna do is to change that number to a much higher, much more current version number, right? Then log in using the auto login. So is that a good thing to have? Probably not, unless there's a good reason why you're using it. But it's on by default. So that's the next place where you're gonna decide on turning it off, unless you have a good reason to leave it on. The third place is allow stored credentials for authentication. Is it a good thing to allow users to store that in their password keychain, right? So what happens if their laptop gets stolen and the password for the computer is 1, 2, 3, 4? Well, not much security for the FileMaker system. unless you have already have the two-factor authentication, because then you have moved the responsibility to someplace else, right? So really consider turning that off, especially because most of the data that is in our FileMaker systems are either privacy sensitive or at least business sensitive. So consider turning that off, right? All right, that was the file level. Easy enough, and you're still awake. So let's go into the solution level. We have like 4 areas: file access, privileges sets, and extended privileges. Let me see. Yeah. I have a lot of slides, so I'm gonna move a little bit fast here. But this is the file access, right? So the easiest way to break in, more or less, is if you can access the file from another file. That's an easy way to get in. So use this feature to require full access to allow access from another file. And then we just got added the second checkbox 2 weeks ago with the newest release, where you can also limit where that file can be hosted. So say, well, if you have a solution where several files are speaking with each other, and they are always on the same host, then check that one, because you don't want another server to access the file on this host if there's no need to it, right? So check both of them and turn them on now. Right? Okay. What's the other thing? I'm gonna move fast forward. So in the privileges set, everyone has seen this before, right? I just wanna go into those 4 areas, even though you have seen it before. The good thing is now, by default, when you create a new privileges set, it says all no access, no access, no access, which is a good thing. It's better to start from no access and then gradually giving more access. Full access from the start is not a good thing. And then, bless you, Ove. Are you okay? Full access from the start. I've heard a lot of developers saying, yeah, I'm just gonna give full access and then I'm gonna develop the feature, and then at some time I'm gonna remove the things that is not needed. The thing is that people rarely get around to remove the stuff again, right? Meaning that we are leaving a door open to get into the data. All right, so when we look at records, what does it really mean when we say we have view access and edit? Well, you all know these parts here, so looking at the list of fields here, you can say access, view only, and modifiable, right? Which is actually the case when we look into records. So again, start with almost nothing, but you can also consider using a calculation. So these calculations, be aware, because they can be really taking up performance, because it has to be evaluated for every single record that you see, right? So my experience is that if we are using a variable, like this one saying created by current user in a variable, it's much better than trying to look into the schema. As soon as FileMaker needs to look into the schema in order to evaluate, things become much more slow. So where we need this, we tend to use global variables, right? Okay, everyone knows that. So looking into the layout, right? So what does it really mean that records are modifiable or view only? What does that mean? Can you do it as a user if you have view only? No. Can a script do it? Yes. So consider that even if you say, well, this layout is a view-only layout, yeah, but if you have a script that is modifying records, it can do so also from that layout. Okay? So there's a difference between a user and a script. A script has more power than a user. Okay? Running forwards to value lists. Again, this is about, are you a user or an author? So we never give the users the privilege to modify a value list because they don't need so. And if they need to modify a value list, we are getting the values from a field instead. Then they can modify the field values instead of the value list. Because the thing is with value lists, the values of a value list exist in the file layer, in the business layer, not in the data layer. So meaning that when we do upgrades, we have these value lists that we have to deal with during a data migration. Okay. Again, with the layouts, no, that was scripts. Sorry. Again, need to look at well, should a script be modifiable? For a user, I would say no. I would never give a user the ability to modify a script. If there is really a super user that should be allowed to modify a script, then it should be a special account and special privileges set. Otherwise, executable only. And like this example saying, okay, yeah, but you only have executable only on one script. The two others is something that you would never need to use. So you should have no access to that. And please be, especially when you create users for API usage or OData or those types of accounts, please be very specific on which scripts can you actually perform. Because normally we have scripts that is doing a lot of different stuff, but we don't want an API to be able to run those scripts. And the only thing it takes is to guess the name of the script, right? Then you can just modify the API request to FileMaker and then run a script. So really, really pay attention to this area. All right. So I'm gonna move fast forward. Yeah. So the other privileges, that was something, those of you who have been around long enough time, that was something we used to have for a long time, and then there has been added stuff here, right? So one common thing I experience is that people are confused about the allow printing and allow exporting. So if you should be allowed to generate a PDF, should you have export or printing privileges, right? So, any guess? Yeah? It's printing. Why is it printing? You think it's printing? Because I wrote it, or? So look at it, a PDF is a digital printout. So a paper printout and a digital printout, that's why it's printing. For Excel or CSV and so on, that's export. And people get confused about those two, or at least some people do, so that's why I just want to reiterate what is the difference, right? And the manage extended privileges and manage accounts that don't have full access, that is really where you want to allocate a sub-admin to manage user accounts in here. But I just said that, don't do that. Use the external authentication from, for example, Azure. So these are options that has arrived to FileMaker more recently, but it's something that, well, at least the second one, but it's something that I would never consider using, really. So this one, so allow user to override data validation warnings. What does that mean? Really? What it says, right? Or, so does that mean that that a user could never overwrite validation warning if this one is not on? Any guess? Anyone who knows? No?
I would think it's the field definition that defines what is the validation of the data, and
Yeah?
these can either be skipped or cannot be skipped.
Yeah. But where do you decide that?
I would
Here?
For the data validation that is in the field,
In the field? Yeah.
I would decide here, I suppose.
And you can override. Okay. So let me just say that what you can do in the schema, you can decide whether a user can be allowed to override or not. So if in the schema you set the data validation and you uncheck the checkbox, unfortunately I don't have a picture of it, but there's a checkbox that you can uncheck, so you do not allow anyone to override. That will supersede everything. But if that one is on, saying, yeah, in some case, which is by default. So in some cases, it's okay to allow a user to override data validation warning. If that one is off, then this user is not supposed to be allowed to override that data validation, right? Maybe another user is allowed to, right? But what happens if you run a script where you have this one on? Skip data entry validation. What happens then? Anyone knows? Will it skip data validation, or now that if this one is off for this user, what will happen? Will it override or not? It will override. Yeah. So the script has actually more privileges than the user, right? So and this one is one that many is, yeah, let's just check this because, right? But it has the consequence that if you by privileges set is disallowing the user to override data validation warnings, they can actually do it still if they can trigger a script that has a commit step where it says skip data entry validation. Okay? Play around a little bit with this and try to log in with the user and log out, because sometimes you see something where, and it was an eye-opener for me as well when I was creating this session. Oh, really? And me and Peter had some discussions, and actually, no, it's not. Oh, shit, yeah, actually, right? So sometimes it can be difficult to really know what's going on. So play around with that. Okay, so the changed user passwords are and so on is only interesting. Yeah, I put in 18 characters here, right? Because of the slide before. But then again, the available menu commands, what does that really mean? How do we set this one? There's minimum, editing only, and full. How do we set these? Full, because why? Then everything works. All right. Yeah. Well, there's the three different ones, right? So yeah, everything works unless you have done something else, right? And what this option is really doing is just setting the different menu commands that is there by default by FileMaker menus, right? So it really decides on whether you're able to do basic editing or you can access all the other menus. Unless you do custom menus, then you have more control, of course, so you can take that away. But sometimes you think, oh, yeah, let me tighten down the security here, so let me set it to minimum. And you have custom menus, and then the user goes in and want to change the font size or the font color, and you have set it to minimum. It's just they cannot do it because the menu is not active, right? And that's because you were a little bit too restrictive here, right? All right, so let's move on to scripts. There's this nice one, grant full access privileges. What does it do? It does what it says it does, right? But actually, it even supersedes remove admin access. So, you grant full access, but you remove full access. Well, that is only some of the access is removed. But if you have granted full access privileges to a script, it actually means that it has full access. That is, it has access in the file where the script is running. So if you have like the UI running in one file and the data in another file, you can do all the things in the UI file, but you do not have full access to the data in the other file. It's file relative only, right? Okay, you all knew that. I'm just repeating things. All right. So only do this when it's really needed. I've seen, unfortunately, places where a developer said, yeah, I couldn't make it work, so I just granted full access to all scripts. Oh man, great. Great security. All right, let's move on to extended privileges, right? So these are the extended privileges. You all seen that, and you all know what that means, right? So I say it's protocolish, and when I say it's protocolish, it's where these extended ones are in use with the WebDirects, the XDBC, FM app, FM XML, FM PHP, and REST, which is a great name for data API, and FM OData, right? You all know what these means, right? Okay, so I have a question for you. I have a solution, and in this solution we are accessing a third party, a MySQL server via ODBC. Should I have XDBC turned on or not for that user? No. No. Why is it not needed? It's only incoming, exactly. So that's the main point here. It's only for incoming access. Should you allow all these to a regular user? No. Only allow what is really needed in here. The other things are about access. So can a script access your FileMaker solution? Can a FMP URL trigger a script in your solution? If not needed, then disable them, right? And then there's some plugin things here. Yeah, okay, so maybe I should just, so what does that mean? So maybe you can see I have FM plugin. That's there by default now if you create a new file. But if you don't have a new file because your solution was built in a previous version, you can add this one, right? So what does that mean? It means that even if another file does not have access to this file, you can still allow a plugin running from one file to access data in another file, okay? Or you can be more specific and say only for the base elements plugin. That's the only plugin I would allow, or the MBS or whatever. So you add the FM plugin and then the 4 characters that is unique for the plugin, which you can get from get plugins, something as JSON, I think. In there you can find those characters. So what happens now? Well, if I have both here and this one is unchecked, it will just take the first one and say, oh, no plugins allowed. So if you want to allow only for a specific plugin, you need to remove the general one that just to say disallow all plugins, because then none will work. If you're deleting this one, it will go to the next plugin thing and see if this specific plugin is allowed. Okay? Make sense? The FM migration, you know that's extended privileges, right? Yes? Yeah, some do. Okay. So no need to say more? No. The idea with the FM migration is that when you do a data migration, originally you needed a full access account, but do we really want to expose a full access account? No, not really. And if we hand out the task of doing a data migration to other people, like if you have a distributed system or you have a vertical market solution, you don't want them to have a full access account, right? So what you do is create an account that has access to nothing, and I mean nothing, except this one. Meaning that the data migration tool can do a data migration, but you cannot log into the file. You have no access to go into the file whatsoever. So that's a kind of a secure way of doing the data migration. Okay? But we can also use extended privileges, and that's probably something, I don't know, how many of you are using custom extended privileges? Yeah, some geeks in the back, yeah. So you can use a custom one, right? So this is a great name for an extended privileges. You can add on those that you want. So the way you can get it is see if a user has this extended privileges or not is by using the get account extended privileges or get current extended privileges, right? So you can see this user has the customer 1, and then he can connect via FileMaker app, and he has to re-authenticate if he is inactive for 10 minutes, right? So what can that be used for? Well, you can use it in a script to determine whether a feature is allowed or not, right? Another thing you could use it for is the hide option. So delete everything, only if you have these special privileges, right? So it can be used for that as well. And since this is living in the security layer of the FileMaker file, it will be more secure than if you run your own ersatz system where you have something in a table and so on, because if it's in the data layer, it's possible to manipulate with it. It's much harder to manipulate with the security layer of the file. All right, so this was the plugin thing I just talked about. Blah, blah, blah. I was already there, okay? I'm gonna move on. Encryption at rest, I said, please, 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 encrypt your file at rest. There's the built-in developer tool in the FileMaker Pro, and it's also in the FileMaker developer tool, which is really a handy tool server side if you do some commands there. And the important thing is that it's also protecting your backups from being cracked. Because, you know, we think things that is running on our server is pretty secure, but then we tend to forget about what about the backups? Well, where are they? Can you crack into those? All right, so I'm running a little bit faster here because I had a lot of slides, and it is boring, so I want to make sure that you don't fall completely asleep. So let's go look at the FileMaker server level, right? There's some settings here that can help with increase the solution security, and by solution security I mean, you know, getting into a solution or an app or a file, whatever name you want to put in. Filter databases, is that security? Well, security by obscurity it is, meaning that you don't get a list of files, you have to guess the files here, right? Another thing that is only accessible via the command line tool, the FMS admin, is require, or maybe it's accessible in the admin API. It's not in the FileMaker FAC, FileMaker admin console, require secure databases. And what does this mean? Anyone knows what that really means? No?
You must have a password on all full access.
Exactly. It has to, all full access accounts must have a password. That is the definition of secure databases. Well, yeah, at least it's more secure than no password, right? So that one is required, and it's on by default, luckily, right? The networking. And this is a new thing, and now it's on all 3 platforms, which is the HTTPS tunneling. And why is that a security thing that we could consider? Well, port 5003 can then be closed on the firewall, meaning that we have one attack vector less in the firewall. And the more ports that we open, the more places an attacker can get in, right? So enabling this one allows for eliminating the needs to have port 5003 open, right? And it's also in the admin console or admin API where you set up your integration with the external authentication. And really, I don't have time to show it here, but there is, if you haven't done that, basically you just change and you need to put in 3 pieces of information. The hard part is to find it on Microsoft's website where to create an app and get those 3 information. But basically, that's the only thing you need, and then it's working. So it is pretty simple, and please consider that if you are not doing it already, right? So SSL, I hear a lot that yeah, well, our server is internal, so we don't need an SSL. Not true. You need SSL and you need the encryption. No outside access is not a thing, even if you think so. We had a customer who had no outside access, of course, but they got hit by a ransomware attack. And that was a shitty Christmas for the IT manager, I would say. So please do that, and Let's Encrypt is now supported on Ubuntu and Mac, so don't have to pay for it, and it's managing itself, and it's actually working quite well, and it's not too complicated to run the shell script that installs this. So please always use this, okay? Access logs. So on the server, they are now on by default, and that is something it should have been born with. It shows access events, right? And the event log shows the authentication errors. So please look into these logs, or the one who is managing your server. Make sure that there's a schedule set up for looking into these, because you can see things there, and you can see IP addresses that is trying to access. Right, so maybe you have a great firewall and an IT department that is good at covering your perimeter, the outside, right? But if you don't have, sometimes you find funny IP addresses that stems from China or North Korea, and that's actually pretty interesting to see if there has been attempts to log into your server from somewhere where, hey, we don't have any workers in North Korea, right? Or China. Well, maybe you do, right? And then it's perfectly okay, right? And if you're using external authentication, monitor those as well, because it will give you an insight into who's actually trying to get into my stuff here, right? Or where is people coming from, and then you can set up more rules saying, okay, we disallow or we block this IP address in the firewall and so on, right? Okay, when it comes to deployment, yeah, use the data migration tool. You already do that. Auto is now free, so that's a great tool. There are other tools as well. Use the account that has access to nothing except the FM migration extended privileges. Maybe you should consider removing full access with the developer tool. So you only have full access in your development version, but the live version, you remove that. It also gives you a great excuse for never doing live development, right? Because you can't, okay? It's more secure. So consider doing that, and that can be set up, okay, with the tools that is already installed on your FileMaker server. Right? And you're still awake? Yep. Okay, good. Now, yeah? Yeah, so the question is that you're using Google for external authentication, and Google doesn't offer any groups, which is kind of annoying, right? So, but Azure does offer groups. That's why I'm talking about Azure. There's, to my knowledge, there's no way of, neither with Google or Amazon, to have any way of using groups with those external, or Apple as well. So I think you need Azure in order to use the groups, or a custom OAuth provider like Okta or Ping or one of those things, but they tend to be kind of expensive, so it's more enterprise-like, right? Okay. So, are you ready to be scared? Okay. So let me ask you a question. Is any one of you running any of these versions on FileMaker server? Be honest. Yes? Yeah? Yeah? Jeroen? Hands up. Yeah, you. You running any of these versions? FileMaker server? Yeah? Okay. So, I will encourage you to not leave the room walking, but run. Run as fast as you can and go and update, because there's a really, really, really bad vulnerability in those versions. And you saw it was all the way from 12 until 19.6.3, as well as 21, 2, and not 3. Okay? So maybe some of you have heard about this vulnerability, but let me just explain briefly to those of you who is not aware. The thing is that you can get into any FileMaker solution if it's hosted on one of these versions. It doesn't matter if you encrypt at rest. It doesn't matter if you're running on even if it's SSL. You can bypass and get access to a full access account without knowing username or password or even type it. And the most scary thing is that an attack like that will not show up in any logs, meaning that you don't even know if someone was in your solution and stealing your data or doing bad stuff. Okay? Do you understand the magnitude of this security issue? So someone could have been into your data, tabbing your database completely without you even being able to detect it anywhere. This is serious. This is really, really serious. Claris is not broadcasting this message because it's a security thing. They say, you know, update, stay current. But I really, really, really encourage you to stay current anyways, but this security issue is really bad. So please run home and update your servers. So the versions that is safe, or at least safe from this security bug, is 19.6.4, 23.2, and any of the 21 issues. These fixes were done in March this year, so it has been discovered earlier. There is some blog posts if you want to read more about the details. You can find on the internet. Matt Petrowski is also, he did a video just last week, I think, about this specific issue. So maybe some of you know. But please run home and update your servers, and tell everybody to update if you meet someone who hasn't updated the servers. Okay? So, just to recap, we talked about security is so many things, authentication versus authorization, solution security, where we took a deep and boring look into the privileges, and we talked a little bit about security around the server, and final but not least, update your software. Stay current, stay current, stay current. Right. So, now we are at the point where we have 10 minutes left. And is there any questions? Yeah, or maybe we should use this if it's working. Yeah. Yeah. Is it working? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. About the SSL certificate,
Yeah.
how do you handle the DNS? I mean, if you have off WAN and LAN, there could be a DNS issue to use the certificate. So
if you have the server in-house?
yeah.
Yeah. So if you have the server in-house in your office, and how I would handle the DNS. Okay. So if I still have a server in-house, I would also have a DNS server. It could be sitting on the same server, but it has to be set up with the network as well. So in the DHCP server, that is normally a part of the router, set up that the first server to go to is this one for DNS, and then you look up the local IP address. Yeah. So that's one way. If you're only maybe 2 or 3 in the office, you could go in and edit the local host file on the machine, at least on Mac. I am not sure how to do it on Windows, but it can be done on a Mac. Okay? Yeah.
Sorry, if I may, on Windows there's a similar file.
Yeah.
There's also
I'm sure. Thanks.
Yes, so I have the server 23.1. I didn't see that in
No.
the bad list, but it
Run.
was...
Run.
Okay.
Yes.
So it should be on the bad list on your slide?
Well, I said 23x, I think. I would, or maybe I wasn't aware. It's 23.2 that is safe.
Okay.
Nothing before that. So, yeah. Any other questions? No? 2 seconds. It's for the video.
So what is the actual attack that you're preventing when updating?
What's the actual?
What's the attack? What they do
What
do
the
to
attack
come
is?
in? Yeah.
Okay, so the attack is that FileMaker uses a protocol and an open source library called Corba that is handling the traffic between the server and the client. So there's a guy in the community who, I don't know how he got the idea, but he was playing around and tried to understand how that mechanism was working. And that's how he discovered this one. He set up a proxy server on his own machine. He had a FileMaker client and then a proxy that was intercepting the communication between the FileMaker client and the FileMaker server. So first he asked for a list of files, because that's what the client is doing, right? So then he knew, okay, and files were listed by index. So there was like 1, 2, 3, because it was all numbers. So maybe there was 25 files, or maybe, so let's try with number 1, right? So you had the index there. Then he made a second call and asked for the indexes of the accounts. And then he got a list of accounts and could see a list of the accounts that existed and the privileges set, right? So, oh, there was one. Number 3 is a full access account. Then he made a new call to the server saying, yeah, let me log in as this full access account. And the server said, oh, wrong password. But he intercepted that in his proxy. So the client, the FileMaker Pro client, didn't know that the server was saying, no, you cannot get in. Then the client sent another communication to the server saying, okay, let's establish a connection. And the server didn't know because it had rejected, but it was still working because that secondary communication between the client and the FileMaker server was not verified, right? Meaning that, and since the server didn't know that there was a connection in place, it didn't log anything, right? So yeah, so basically bypassing and putting a man-in-the-middle attack, but it was all done on the same machine, client machine. And it's not, it apparently, I don't know the things, but he said there, it's only like 20 lines of code that he wrote to build that proxy. So it wasn't even a complicated thing to bypass that. So that's why I say, you know, run, because if it's apparently pretty easy to do, then chances are that if someone hasn't already done, someone might want to try to do it, right? Okay. Any other questions? No? You're all asleep and looking forward to lunch, right? Okay, so thank you.